Chairman and Madam Secretary, General Goldfein, good to see you both. And it's always impressive to me to hear about just how broad the mission set is for the Air Force. And please pass on our compliments to the professionalism and the service of the men and women you are leading. I want to provide one example of that professionalism. In the last 2 months in Alaska, the F-22 pilots, Guard and Active, and the KC-135 pilots have done missions to intercept Russian Bear bomber runs at America's sovereign airspace 5 times in the last 2 months. 5 intercepts, different ones. General Goldfein, what are the Russians up to, and what are you, in your discussions on the tank and the Joint Chiefs, what should be our response?
So we are seeing an increase in Russian activity when it comes to long-range aviation. We're seeing that.
What are they testing our NORAD capabilities? I mean, what are they doing? What do we see them trying to do right now? Well, it's a lot of intercepts in a 2-month period.
It is. It's a combination of things that we're seeing relative to them reaching out with advancements in aviation that they've invested in, and we're also seeing this as much in the Pacific theater as well. When we see that not only from Russia but also from China. So we've seen long-range aviation increases. I'll just give one example. I was talking to my counterpart in Japan, and he was telling me that Japan for this year will actually exceed over 1,000 intercepts this year, which is more than they've ever had in their history.
And are we learning something from our perspective on the intercepts of the Chinese or Russian bomber flights?
We learned something on every particular intercept, yes, sir.
Let me ask another question. Last year's NDAA provided the Air Force guidance with the KC-46 Oconus bed down as you're looking to make that decision. Some of the guidance talked about the ability to support multiple combatant commanders and their different warfighting capabilities near training areas, co-located with other Air Force assets like fifth-generation fighters, part of an air bridge to the Asia Pacific. Are you familiar with that provision in the NDAA?
Yes, sir, I am.
Are you, Madam Secretary?
Yes, sir.
Good. What are the 3 key lessons that we've learned in the ongoing development and deployment of the F-35?
I'd say overall, the most important lesson we've learned is the importance of information fusion and how we can take an aircraft that's be able to sense both with what it can do on the aircraft with what it does off the aircraft to be able to then be the quarterback for a formation. And very quickly, let me just give you a sense of what I saw when I went to Red Flag recently and saw the F-35's debut. Now, I flew the F-117. And in the first generation of stealth, we actually had a switch in the cockpit called the stealth switch. And when we flipped the switch, all the antennas would stow, all the emissions would stop, and we'd close off the world. The F-35 actually connects into the network before the pilot climbs the ladder. And in Nellis Air Force Base, we have a cyber protection team, cyber mission teams that are engaged in a cyber war that are doing this on a cyber range, and that the impacts are being fed to the cockpit and on the displays of the F-35 pilot. We had space activities and actual space capabilities taking place in the middle of the campaign, and the impacts of those were actually on the displays and on the helmet of the F-35. He's calling audibles for the formation at 2 o'clock in the morning based on the impacts of the space and cyber wars before he even crosses in enemy territory. It's about the fusion of capability of information that the F-35 brings.
Senator, there's one other thing that I think is going to be sometimes when you have vastly new capabilities, the people who are using those capabilities, the pilots that are out there, start to think of new ways of doing things. So I think we're only at the beginning of the innovation that we're going to see in the way in which we fight with these new tools. And so I think it's just starting. It will change the way we fight. The night before I was sworn in, we had dinner at the chief's house at Air House with the head of the Israeli Air Force. And the Israelis still fly. The chief of staff still flies. We don't let our chief of staff still fly. He said something as soon as he met me. He said, "I've had 7 sorties in the F-35." And he said, "This is a game changer. There's nothing like it." This is an air chief who's flown the F-16, the F-15, the F-4, and done all of those things in combat as an Israeli in the Middle East, and he said, there's nothing like this in the world. This changes the game.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.